You know the moment. You're standing in your backyard. Maybe you stepped out for coffee. Maybe you're watching the feeder the way you do most mornings. There's the usual layering of sound. A chickadee working through the branches, a house sparrow somewhere near the fence, maybe the low wooden knock of a downy woodpecker on the oak. And then it stops. All of it. At once. The feeder swings slightly in the breeze. Nothing lands. The yard feels different. Not quiet the way early morning is quiet, but alert. Held. As if the entire neighborhood just took a breath and decided not to let it go. Most people feel the shift before they understand it. Something in the quality of that silence makes you look up. That instinct is not accidental. And the birds that went silent, they were not simply afraid. They were communicating.
The common assumption is that birds go silent when a predator appears, a hawk overhead, a cat moving through the understory, and that the silence is the absence of something, the absence of safety, the absence of normalcy, the absence of noise. But that framing misses almost everything important about what is actually happening. Birds don't simply stop singing when danger appears. They transmit. The silence is not emptiness. It is a specific signal, encoded with information, passed outward through a network of species that have been sharing threat intelligence across your yard, your street, and your entire neighborhood for as long as birds have lived near each other. Before you understand what the silence means, you first have to understand what birds are always saying, and why the moment they stop is, biologically speaking, louder than anything that came before it.
Christopher Templeton at the University of Washington spent years listening to black-capped chickadees. What he found, published in 2005 in the journal Science, fundamentally changed how ornithologists think about bird communication. Chickadees don't issue a single alarm call. They encode specific information about a threat into the structure of the call itself, its number of D notes, its rhythm, its urgency. A high-flying red-tailed hawk receives a different call than a perched Cooper's hawk at eye level. The higher the threat to life, the more D notes appended to the call. Other species in the yard, nuthatches, titmice, housefinches, have learned to decode these calls. They eavesdrop on chickadee alarm signals and respond accordingly, even though the call was not directed at them. The yard is not a collection of individual birds. It is a shared intelligence network.
Think about the last time you saw a hawk pass over your feeder. In the moment before the yard emptied, a chickadee issued a high, thin seet, a sound designed by evolution to be nearly impossible to locate. No starting point, no direction, just a needle of sound that says, "Aerial predator, go now." Every bird within earshot responded to that signal, not because they all saw the hawk, but because they all heard the call. What happened next, the silence that followed, was not the end of communication. It was a different kind of message entirely. The silence told every bird still in the area, the threat is unresolved. Stay hidden. Do not move. Do not make a sound. The silence is a standing alarm, held in place by the collective decision of every animal still listening. This collective behavior has a name in behavioral ecology: heterospecific alarm response. The idea is simple. Species that share the same predators benefit from sharing threat information, even across the boundary of species. Research from multiple institutions, including a 2012 study published in Animal Behavior, documented that mixed species foraging flocks respond not just to the calls of their own kind, but to the alarm calls of unrelated species, adjusting both their behavior and their level of response based on the specific signal they receive. Your backyard operates on exactly this principle. The sparrow at the feeder is not just listening for hawks. It is listening to the chickadee, the titmouse, the nuthatch, and the robin. It has spent its entire life calibrating what each of their alarms means.
This network extends well beyond your yard. It runs the length of your street. Work by Daniel Blumstein at UCLA, along with collaborative studies at the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology, has established that alarm information can propagate through bird communities across distances of hundreds of meters, passed from flock to flock, species to species, in a wave that can precede the actual arrival of a predator at any given point. A hawk hunting a corridor through your neighborhood triggers silence in yards it has not yet reached. The birds there did not see the hawk. They heard the silence traveling toward them, the sudden cessation of normal activity spreading as a wave ahead of the threat. This is called the landscape of fear. It is not metaphor. It is a measurable, mapped phenomenon. The quiet you felt in your yard may have originated 4 houses away. And what about when there is no predator? What triggers the silence then?
There are false alarms, a car backfiring, a dog barking in an unexpected register, a sudden loud human sound from inside the house. Birds respond to novelty, anything that breaks the established pattern of safe sounds in a known environment. Research on bird stress hormones, published across multiple journals from 2010 through 2023, has established that birds living near unpredictable noise sources, construction, traffic, irregular human activity, maintain elevated corticosterone levels, the avian equivalent of chronic stress. When the environment is predictable, birds learn what is safe. When predictability breaks, the network defaults to silence while it recalibrates. A yard where birds feel safe has an established sound texture, the same feeders, the same routines, the same human presence at the same times. Disruption of that texture, even minor disruption, can trigger a community-wide pause. The silence, in other words, is not just a warning about predators. It is a measurement of trust. Consider what it means for a small bird to make sound. Sound is location. Every call a bird makes is a broadcast of exactly where it is. In a safe environment, a yard with consistent food, familiar humans, established cover, birds sing freely because the benefit of communicating outweighs the risk of being found. When that calculus changes, even slightly, they go quiet. The silence tells you something that no single bird call could, that the collective judgment of every animal in your yard has concluded simultaneously that the cost of sound has just exceeded its benefit. You are reading a consensus, a live vote. Every bird that fell silent cast a ballot, and that consensus is built on information, on calls passed down the network, on a history of what this particular yard sounds like when it is safe, on an accumulated map of threat and familiarity that has been updated every hour of every day for years. But there is one more layer to the silence, one that most people never consider. It involves not just what the birds heard, but what they remembered. Research from Cambridge University, the Scrub Jay memory studies conducted by Nicola Clayton and her team, ongoing since 1998, established that birds possess what scientists call episodic-like memory, the ability to recall not just what happened, but where and when it happened. Applied to alarm behavior, this means birds remember specific locations where threats occurred. They remember which corner of which yard a hawk perched in last Tuesday. They remember which stretch of fence a cat walked along 2 days ago. When something in the current environment matches that stored pattern, even partially, it can trigger a preemptive silence before any call is issued, before any visible threat appears. The birds in your yard may be going quiet because of something that happened days ago. Return to the moment. You are standing in your backyard. The feeder is still. The chickadee you heard a moment ago has pressed itself against a branch, motionless. The sparrows that were working the ground beneath the feeder are gone. Not fled, just invisible, absorbed into the exact cover they've used before. Nothing in the yard is random.
Every bird in that silence is in a specific position, chosen by calculation. The gaps in the foliage, the angle away from open sky, the perch that offers a clear sightline in 3 directions. They are not simply hiding. They are holding a formation. And somewhere above, or approaching, or remembered, there is a reason. The silence you walked into is a map. It has a shape. It points somewhere. And every bird in your yard is reading it in real time, with more precision than you will ever have access to.
Wait. Notice something. While you have been watching the feeder, the silence has already begun to break. One chickadee, somewhere in the oak, a brief, tentative contact call. Not an alarm, not a song, just a pulse of sound that says, "I am here. Is it safe?" Then another. And slowly, the way a room begins to fill with conversation after a loud noise has passed, the yard returns. The sparrows reappear at the base of the feeder. The woodpecker resumes on the oak. Sound returns not in a flood, but in a sequence. A layered reestablishment of normal, tested note by note. That return is also a signal. Every bird in the yard is reading the silence as it lifts, calibrating when it is safe to be visible again. You were standing inside a decision the whole time.
The bird that goes silent in your yard is connected to every other bird in your neighborhood through a network that runs on sound and memory and collective judgment. That chickadee is not just a small creature at a feeder. It is a node in a distributed intelligence that has been operating in your yard for longer than you have lived there. The next time the silence falls, and it will, you already know what to do. Look up. Look at where the birds have gone. Read the shape of the absence. And if you want to understand what your birds say before the silence falls and why certain species disappear from your yard without warning, you'll find the answer in the video appearing on your screen now. The birds are always talking. Today, you learned how to listen to what they say when they stop.